that summer where I was getting separated and divorced, I mean, I didn't care. I mean, I just wanted the pain to end. We thought it was pretty routine, but once they started doing the checks and things, the tone of the room kind of got kind of quiet. The nurse was like, "Hold on, I need to go get the doctor," and we were like, "What just happened?" From the time 2015 hit to the time of probably 2019, we had about 8 deaths in the family.
Wow.
And my kids, my son and my daughter at the time had experienced more death and funerals than I had in my entire life.
Have you ever been blindsided by bad news? And I'm not talking about a concert being sold out. I'm talking about devastating news. Life-altering news. I remember my dad calling me at 4 a.m. to tell me that my brother had taken his own life. It was the worst news I had ever heard before or since. Maybe you have recently received this kind of news. Maybe someone close to you has passed. Maybe you or someone you know has received news of disease or sickness that will change their life forever. You know that God is supposed to work all things for good, but how? How can He take this kind of news and turn it into something good? Can God truly take this kind of hurt and turn it into joy? These are some of the questions that I want to ask our guest today as he shares his life change story. Hey friend, why don't you introduce yourself and let the listeners know who you are?
My name is Jeremy. I am a grateful believer in Jesus Christ. I struggle with codependency, workaholic tendencies, and grief, and I'm grateful to be here.
Hey, Jeremy, it's glad to have you. Thanks for joining me today. I know
Absolutely.
you through church, and I'm so glad that you agreed to come here and tell us your life change story. So why don't we start off with telling the listeners kind of where you grew up? I mean, were you born in Northwest Arkansas, or did you grow up somewhere else and move here? Tell us a little bit about your past.
I was born in Topeka, Kansas. Lived in that area, Topeka, Olathe, Kansas City area for about 7 years, and then moved down here when I was 8. I've been in Northwest Arkansas now 34 years. So,
oh, wow. So most of your life.
Most of my life I've been here. And so I've seen a lot of changes, a lot of growth, just personally and through the city.
Yeah.
Northwest Arkansas has changed immensely in those 34 years.
So did you grow up with any siblings or?
I did. 6 boys. I'm one of 6 boys.
Wow.
No sisters. I get the question all the time. And so I'd say no girls in my family. And people are like, what about your mom? I'm like, oh, no, that's mom. She's not a girl. I don't know what you're talking about. So it's kind of one of those funny things that it's just been growing up with 6 boys, the amount of chaos and the amount of food that my parents went through. I'm surprised that they were able to feed us all. We actually ate very well, as you can tell.
So where are you on the totem pole? Were you the baby, or were you in the middle somewhere, or where were you?
I was kind of unique. I was number 2. Or I am number 2, I guess. My older brother, and then myself, and then there's an 11-year gap, and then there's 4 more. Wow. And so we got to learn a lot about kids growing up. Like I was 11 when my next youngest brother was born. Got pretty proficient at helping changing diapers and things like that. So it was kind of a cool way to grow up. I never really thought about it until I started meeting other families of just younger siblings, and they were all very close, so they never really had that experience. And so, like my wife would tell you, she didn't know about changing diapers until she was like babysitting and things like that.
Right.
And it's been kind of a funny thing between the two of us. And she's like, you knew how to change diapers one-handed, eat one-handed. I mean, she's like, that's not normal. Normal people don't normally see that. So
you had a little experience that most men don't have.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Because my youngest brother was born when I was 18. And so there was a from the time I was 11 till the time I was 18, there was a lot of mom and dad needed some help, extra hands here and there. We were all homeschooled, so or at least my older brother and I were, up until my next youngest brother. He actually was public schooled in the last 4. So it's my mom was kind of like, well, it's easy to homeschool too. It's harder to homeschool 2 plus 4 when they're going into kindergarten and learning to read and things like that. So that became a challenge.
So how much older is your brother than you?
So my older brother is only 11 and a half months older than myself.
Okay, so you guys aren't too far apart now. Did you fight like cats and dogs, or were you guys really close?
There was some times that we would get to wrestling around and music choices. I mean, I was a heavy DC Talk fan. He was a heavy audio adrenaline fan. So you got two spectrums there of just music tastes. And so we would try to split that up. But then there were days where I'm like, I'm going to turn my music up louder. And we shared a room most of my life because we were so close in age. We just shared a room all the time. And so there was a time where we got to wrestling around. We put a hole in the wall. It was a big body print of me picking up my brother and kind of pushing him forward. And we put a poster over the wall. I'm not condoning this at all whatsoever. We forgot about it until we moved out, and we took the poster down, and there was a hole in the wall.
And Mom was like, what happened here?
Mom was like, tell me about this hole. And my dad's like, well, you guys know the drill, because growing up, if we put a hole in the wall, we drywalled it. We didn't pay for it. We actually had to do it. Wow. So we learned how to drywall that way.
So you mentioned two music groups that are Christian, DC Talk and Audio Adrenaline. And I know that, but sometimes the listeners don't. So it sounds to me like there was at least a knowledge of God and that sort of thing. So tell me about that. I mean, did your parents bring you up with a Christian belief system, or how did that work?
Oh, absolutely. Grew up in Christian family. Both parents grew up in Christian families. So grandparents went to church Sunday, Wednesdays, and just kind of had that Christian background, just a solid Christian background. I mean, my grandfather, he's still in Topeka. He loves the Lord. He really kind of poured into the generations. On my mom's side of the family, for my grandfather, there's 19 grandkids. 17 boys, 2 girls.
17 boys. My goodness.
And so my grandfather instilled a lot of the leadership and what it means to be a godly man. And I've never seen him angry unless it was for a good reason. I mean, he was always calm. He always approached everything in a very stable way. So I think a lot of times where I kind of think back and go, wait, my grandfather, he taught me that, that kind of thing. I loved my grandfather to death. I mean, he really poured into me growing up.
So how was your relationship with your dad and your mom? Because they were there with you all the time. Were you close with them, or was Dad always at the office, or how was that like?
Absolutely. My dad was a programmer, or still is a programmer, I guess. He was work from home. So I mean, a lot of my family unit was home all the time, being homeschooled. My dad working at home, my mom working in the house. And so, I mean, it was just kind of one of those things. I mean, we really enjoyed it. There were things that my dad taught me on how to run a small business or be self-employed. Because he was self-employed, gosh, from the time we moved. Oh, it was probably about 2 years after we moved down here. And then he became self-employed, and then he was self-employed for 20 years, 30 years.
Wow.
So
what was it like being homeschooled? Because most kids, at least I would assume that most kids, I was one of those kids that went to public schools and had interaction with other people who had different belief systems and everything else, but you were kind of confined there to your home. Did you have much interaction with other kids, or what was that like?
We were kind of a weird homeschool family. We were weird for the public schoolers, and we were also weird for the homeschoolers. We didn't really fit either group. I played hockey growing up. We met people at Jones Center. The guys that we played hockey with were the guys that were not football players out of Springdale. They were not. They didn't play any other sports like most of them, so they didn't fit into the school sports system. And so within that hockey crew, we really found a cool niche of just great guys to play hockey with, to learn about family units. There was about 5 guys growing up that we would spend time in their houses, and as long as Mom knew we were in one of those 5 houses, we were fine.
So it sounds like you had a really happy childhood, and had good relationships with your siblings and your mom and dad. So I know, and being adults now that sometimes we realize now that there were some dysfunctions in that family that maybe we didn't recognize when we were kids? Or was there any of that going on in your family? I mean, how did you, do you recognize that now compared to maybe then?
Absolutely. With being a family of 6 boys, I mean, things were chaotic a lot. I didn't see my family. I didn't see my mom and dad fight. I just didn't know that married couples fight. I mean, that was kind of one of those things where I couldn't put my finger on it, but something was different. And some of my codependency was because I knew mom was upset, but I didn't know if she was upset with me. So I would internalize that and say, "Oh, mom, are you okay? Or are you happy with everybody?" And I knew that there was something wrong, but it was mom and dad fighting. But it was hard to see because in their families, when they were growing up, when the fight happened, it never showed outside of the house. I mean, everything was kind of this perfect facade almost. And so I didn't learn how to fight. I didn't learn how to work through issues and come back to it. And so that's happened in the last 20 years as my wife and I have been married. So, but that's been a really cool thing to understand and to learn about.
So it didn't sound like you had a lot of conflict in your family. It sounded like you guys got along pretty good, or you, at least you ensured that there was a lot there. So you introduced yourself with having codependency. How would you define codependency?
I hated to have people upset around me, or I would think that they were upset at me, and so I would take that on without even asking questions, or I would try to kind of lighten the mood by kind of being goofy or saying a joke. Or I learned juggling early on just because everybody loves juggling, right? And so it was just one of those things that. If someone was upset, or I would go out of my way, even if I didn't have the bandwidth to take on, I would take it on. And those boundaries were not healthy. It was just saying yes to projects because I needed to help them feel better. And that wasn't the heart behind it was I need these people, I need everybody to be okay and be happy. And so that codependency just ran rampant.
Yeah. So where was God in your youth? I mean, you said you listened to Christian music. I mean, it sounded like your parents were Christians and that was a part of it. But where would you say you had a God moment, a God experience as a child?
As a child, growing up in church, I got baptized early on. I got saved early. And it was kind of one of those things that I saw the people around me, and I knew that Christianity was something that my family valued. And so I asked Jesus into my heart, and then about 6-8 months later, I got baptized. And that was with a church up in Topeka. My dad baptized me. It was really cool just to kind of have that experience. And then just being able to publicly display, hey, I am a Christian. And then that's how I wanted to lead my life.
So you basically graduated from homeschool, and then where did that lead you? When did you move out of the house? Did you get a job right out of high school? I mean, tell me about your after high school years.
Well, my college career was a little bit weird too, because once I graduated high school, I had already had some work experience, but during that time, it was always everybody was like, "Oh, you're graduated. Now you're expected to go to college, I guess." And it was just that, "Hey, what are you going to do in college?" And it was just kind of forced into. And I thought I was going to be an architect, and I wanted to go to school for architecture. I failed my creative art classes. I didn't do well with that, and so. Architecture was out. I worked 2-3 jobs while I was going to college to pay for college. Wasn't getting a whole lot of sleep and things. And then I realized after year 2, architecture classes just got harder. I had a friend that was in architecture, and she was in for 4 or 5 years. But she said by the year 2, you were pretty much sleeping at the studio. I mean, that's just kind of the way that kind of rolled. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to just change over to computer sciences because I had built computers from the time I was 12. My dad's a programmer. I mean, so all of that kind of fit right in. And what I found is that the school was actually about 2 years behind of the current technologies back then. And so I was like, I'm not even going to finish this. This is just ridiculous because I'm paying money for things I already know. And so just went right back into IT work, started my first IT company in 2001.
Wow.
And I've been doing IT ever since.
So where did you meet your wife since you were homeschooled and everything? Tell me that story.
This is my second marriage, but through high school, I had dated a girl, and we thought we were going to get married. And through college, we were both in heavy college of law and and architecture, and it just she kind of sprung it on me that, hey, I want to have a baby, and I was like, whoa, hold up, I'm 19, you're 18, this is not going to happen. We're pre-law, we're architecture, whatever. And it was one of those times where it was like, I can't see us doing that. No, not a chance. But she ended up cheating on me. She got pregnant, and that was that. And so we went from being married in January to separated in June to divorced in November.
That fast.
So I mean, it was boom. But
So let's go back. Because you dated this girl in high school. It sounds to me like you guys got married right out of high school.
Right out of high school.
Okay.
Yep.
So you got married, and that was in January. But the reason why you got married, and she wanted to have a child. It sounds like that was a goal of hers. And so, but you didn't have a child through her, correct? Okay.
Correct.
But so January to June, I mean, it became real obvious that life isn't all cake and cookies.
Yeah. And that was one of those where going into my second marriage, I realized kind of what things kind of looked like. So that kind of short year between 1999 and 01 was just a kind of tough. It was kind of almost a black hole, which is kind of why I kind of forget about it sometimes. But I forget that that's part of my story. Right. And so the things that I learned through that, I was able to carry on into dating Diane. And once we got married and understanding kind of this two-way thing and knowing where some of my boundaries were, I didn't learn a lot about codependency until 2019.
Right.
So
you recognize that now when you didn't really recognize it then. So let me ask you this question. It sounds to me like you had a lot of confidence and that you felt very good about yourself. Where would you say your identity was? So, after your first marriage, I mean, that tends to really deal hard with, I know I've been divorced and dealing hard emotionally with you. Did it change the way you thought about yourself, or what did you think about Jeremy after that time period?
My identity was from the time I was probably in high school until that divorce my identity was hockey, and it was husband. It was school, and that was I had to succeed in those three things, because otherwise, what's the point? And so once I realized that these things could be fragile or be taken away, or that summer where I was getting separated and divorced, I mean, I didn't care. I mean, I just wanted the pain to end, and just being able to numb, I guess. My older brother had given me his motorcycle for the summer, which was probably the bad thing to do. Thank God I didn't get into any wrecks or anything. But I mean, I would just put the helmet on and just be on the motorcycle for hours at a time, because I couldn't think of it about anything else. All I had to do was drive. And so I probably did 1,000 miles on that bike that summer just because I could.
Was that your coping mechanism?
Yes.
Is to
Absolutely.
get on that motorcycle and just escape reality? Mm-hmm. So whenever you got married to Diane, it sounds to me like you had a little bit of an experience and thought, okay, it may, I'm going in here, had a problem with my first marriage. I don't think I'm going to have one with this one, but it sounded to me like you kind of had a little bit eye-opening experience. So how was that relationship with Diane that first year and going into that? I mean, was that good? Did you guys get pregnant early, or how? Tell me about that first year in your marriage with Diane.
Yeah, so that first year, we actually had a very open conversation as we were dating and as we were engaged. We knew that the relationships we had previously come from, both of us had said, this is not right. We want something different. And so those conversations happened early on. And then we went through counseling at Fellowship, through marriage counseling with Gary Harrell. Love him to death. And so we learned a lot about marriage and things together. And so we had a good 5 year stable platform of dating before we had our first child, Keo. My son, he came in '07.
So I know you've had some struggles. Why don't you go walk us through that?
So Keo was born in 2007. Eden was born in November of 2008, so it was about a year and a half apart. 2017, we found out we were pregnant again. So my daughter would have been, 9? So she was just about 10, but she was 9 at the time. We had this conversation of, oh my gosh, we're pregnant. We have an 8-year gap of, oh, wow. Now it's another car seat, another round of diapers. I thought we were completely done with diapers. And so we kind of step back and look, okay, all right, God, you got this plan. It wasn't something that we had in our plan, but hey, we're just going to go with it. So from January of 2017 to April, everything was great. Everything checked out. They scheduled an ultrasound in April of 17. In that ultrasound, we thought it was pretty routine, but once they started doing the checks and things, the tone of the room kind of got kind of quiet. The nurse was like, "Hold on, I need to go get the doctor," and we were like, "What just happened?" So doctor came in, he did some checks. He didn't even say hi. He just went straight to the ultrasound machine, started looking, and so I was kind of like, this guy's kind of being a jerk. I mean, hey, how are you? Who are you? What you doing? And just started kind of throwing red flags. And so then he kind of turned to us and he said, hey, I need to tell you that your daughter has anencephaly. What is this? I've never heard the term, but it's where the skull doesn't form above the eyebrows. And so he said it's terminal. And so it was a shock. I mean, just absolute shock. Like my mom had 6 boys, didn't have any troubles. Had some unique struggles with the youngest one, but everything was fine. But in this situation, they were just like, it's straight terminal. And so we go from this roller coaster of, oh my gosh, we're having another kid. Oh my gosh, this is going to be awesome. Oh my gosh, she's terminal. And just the roller coaster that was that first 4 months of that pregnancy was just insane.
Did the doctor offer to terminate the baby before the pregnancy?
So he didn't, but there were other, I'm using air quotes of, we can have other delivery options. And it was one of those things that we started kind of digging in, and they're like, what are the other delivery options? Oh, well, delivering early or terminating or things like. And the biggest thing on my heart was she has a heartbeat. If she has a heartbeat, then she's under my care. Who am I to say, hey, this is going to be hard. We're going to terminate early. That's just not in my vocabulary. And so we went through the next month or so of just kind of processing that, and then handing that over to God and saying, you know what? It is what it is. We don't know what to do. We don't know how to plan for this. So we'll just make the most of it. And the personality that Savvy Grace had, my hands are always warm. I would touch Mama's belly and Savvy would kind of calm down. And Eden's hands, my daughter, her hands are always cold. And so she would touch Mama's belly and Savvy would play. She would kind of poke and kick and turn and kind of play around. And so Eden thought that was the greatest thing. And just seeing her react, even in the womb. You can't tell me that there's not someone there understanding what's going on. I mean,
and so just to be clear, Savvy is the name of your unborn child, right?
Okay. At the time. So the next 6 months, we carried her to term. She had a strong heartbeat. She had movement. I mean, so we just didn't know what to expect. We prayed for healing. We said, God, please heal her. And so we started doing more research about anencephaly, and it's not something the doctors know a lot about. The skull forms at like the 6-week mark, and so you can't really detect anencephaly until you have like those ultrasounds and start seeing the development. And so once once we got to delivery, everybody knew our doctor, super sweet doctor. She said she didn't know what to do. I guess she said we could deliver her, and her heart could stop. She could be with us for a while. There's been anencephaly children that have been around for 3 or 4 days. There's been anencephaly children that have been around for a couple of years. I mean, so there's just kind of this weird unknown that we couldn't plan for. And so, September 5th, 2017, we delivered 40 weeks. She was 4.5 pounds, just tiny little angel. We did get to see her eyes open, super deep blue eyes. And she was only with us about 10 minutes, and then her heart stopped. And that was, she went home. And so, one of the things that has been with me since, Eden, my first daughter, she said, "Mom, why is everybody so sad? She gets to meet Nana today. She gets to play with Nana." And I'm like, "Oh, are you kidding me?" That hurts. But to see it from a 9-year-old's perspective of she's with Nana, because Nana had passed away a couple of years earlier, which is Diane's mom. And it was just a lesson in what can I control and what I can't control. I knew that I was a Christian, but it was harder to kind of translate that from head knowledge to heart knowledge, because I had a very smooth childhood. There wasn't a lot of loss or death in the family. There wasn't a lot of storms in the family. We didn't experience a lot of just hurts growing up. So it made it easy to kind of be that Christian of, hey, wow, this is pretty easy. I think this is all right. And it wasn't until about 2015 that when we started experiencing things like Diane's mother passing away. From the time 2015 hit to the time of probably 2019, we had about 8 deaths in the family.
Wow.
And my kids, my son and my daughter at the time had experienced more death and funerals than I had in my entire life.
Wow.
And so in their short lives, they lost a grandmother, they lost a sister, they lost a great-grandfather, a great-grandmother, another great-grandmother. I mean, just one right after another, just crazy stacked. And Keo took it pretty hard. He was very quiet that day, but he has a very tender heart, and still to this day has a tender heart of he doesn't like to see people hurting, and just how both Keo and Eden reacted, and as the family, as the 4 of us kind of pulled together, and we were like, we're in this together, we're a family. It actually drew us together and didn't drive us apart. Which I didn't know at the time, but they say when you lose a child, the divorce rate just explodes. And so that was just not something on the table, because, I mean, the 4 of us were hurting. Well, I mean, it was not in my vocabulary to say, well, I'm hurting, see ya. And so that 2017 year was kind of that pivot point of being able to take the head knowledge that I had and truly apply it. To say, you know what, God, it's not my will, it's yours. Plum has a great song called Broken Places. It has been around, it's been out for years, and I didn't know it. But the first 2 lines in that song are, I trust you to heal, I trust you to save. But that next line just killed me, was that I trust you enough to get out of the way. And I had to get out of the way. I had to take my plan and my will and say, you know what, God, it's not mine, it's yours. And I need to get out of the way on that.
So in recovery, we say God never wastes a hurt. So how has God used this hurt in your life to, for positive change?
Then that's that shift from my head knowledge to my heart knowledge. And that's where God took that and empowered my ability to understand hurts and habits and hangups and the numbing mechanisms that come along with those. I have a huge soft spot for mental health. I love to talk to people about hurts and habits and hangups, because I don't want people to hurt. I mean, that was built into me from very, very early. But I now have a tool set of saying, hey, if you're hurting, then let's fill it with God instead of filling it with a chemical, or filling it with workaholic tendencies, or codependency, or anger, and so each of those things can be something that I just hang on to, but knowing that God says, hey, hang on to me, we'll take care of the rest.
Thanks, Jeremy, for sharing your story with us. Hey, if you are listening today and you or someone you know has received some bad news, sometimes there are no good reasons and answers to why something bad has happened. Maybe something bad has happened to you a long time ago, and the bitterness of that hurt has run through your life like poison. Maybe you have resentment toward God. I can't answer the question of why, but I can tell you that God can heal you as you surrender that hurt back to Him. He can bring purpose to your hurt, and He can lead you through the darkness. Do you need healing? Do you need a higher power to get you through a tough time? Well, God is waiting to turn your mourning into dancing, your graves into gardens. He is the only one who can. However, if nothing changes, nothing changes. See you next time.